back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hi guys! I'm here today to do some book reviews. I have two to review for you. The first one is a fairy tale retelling. It's called The Bear and the Nightingale and it's written by Catherine Arden. The other one is Ninefox Gambit, which is written by Yoon-Ha Lee and is a military science fiction book. So they're quite different. Let's start off with Ninefox Gambit. So I picked this one up as I wanted to read it because loads and loads of people that I know and love really enjoyed this one. So I thought, okay, I will give it a go. I'd heard lots of great things about the story and the fact that it was really confusing and weird and wacky, so I went into it knowing that. I think you have to go into this knowing it's going to be confusing, otherwise it will start to really overwhelm you. It's quite a short book. I tabbed quite a lot because I was trying to do a buddy read of this with Maya from Maya Reads and Paul from A Common Touch of Fantasy. I'll link them both below. And we had really good fun buddy reading this. I left loads of thoughts and as you can see I was tabbing so that I would remember to talk about things because I read a lot of this whilst I was on the bus going to work. So maybe that was part of the problem I had with it, was that I wasn't taking in as fully as I would if I'd been sat in my bed reading like I normally am, rather than being on a bus and trying to focus on things around me as well. It was a hard book to wrap my head around at first. There were definitely sections of this which I found really difficult to fully comprehend. I think that is the intention of the author. I don't think you're meant to fully understand things yet because this is the first one in a series. However, with that said, it was really, really good at points as well. In this story, we're following a young lady called Cheris, and she is part of the Kel Command. She is a soldier, she's fighting in the Calendrical Wars, and she is battling against this other rival tribe or group who have a different magic system which they don't agree with and they're fighting for territory and things like that. So that's how the story begins. We then see Cheris being taken by a ruling power, and once she is taken by them and she agrees to work for them, she actually gets promoted, but she ends up managing to share her head with a mass murderer called Jediyo. And Jediyo is one of these super masterful, amazing brains who's kind of psychotic and crazy all at once. He was a person who lived many hundreds of years ago, and he has been kind of kept on ice essentially, like they can bring him back when necessary, but he is also completely kind of crazy because of this. He's definitely going insane, and they meld the two of these characters together, Jediyo and Cheris, and that is what we follow in this story. We follow the melding of them, we follow the kind of competition with the other rival factions and belief systems, and we're basically following a large-scale battle which they have a lot of control over and get very much immersed in. It's quite confusing. The military aspects of this book I did not feel were done very well, if I'm honest. I thought that they were quite basic, and when they weren't basic they were overly complex. So there was two ends of the spectrum. Either it was really dull and I didn't really see anything exciting happening, or it was too much and there was too much going on and I couldn't wrap my head around it. So it was definitely one or the other at various points. With that said, I think the moral aspects and the human aspects in this book of the melding of these two people, what that means to be so closely connected to someone that you start feeling their emotions, what it means to kind of have this really strong bond with someone who's been through some horrible stuff. I thought all of that was fascinating. I thought that was really, really well done, and I think the fact that it was a military science fiction maybe just jarred a little bit with me because I personally don't really like battle scenes that much in fantasy, science fiction or anything. So military SF is not something I would typically pick up. As I say, I picked this up because of how many great reviews it was getting. And I do think it deserves some of those things. I think the magic system is interesting, if not fully explained. I think that the various different commands and factions and tribes and people are again really interesting. There's certainly a strong influence from insects. A lot of their ships are called like moth ships and stuff, which is quite cool to imagine. However, with that said, I don't think enough exposition was given in this book. I think that there were moments where we got a little bit of information or a lot of information that didn't make any sense, but the whole thing didn't tie together as I wanted it to. I'd heard from a lot of people that the ending was going to like blow my mind. I think the ending was good, but I don't think it was great, and I just had problems with this throughout. So There were bits I loved, bits I didn't, and I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. I think it's one of those books where maybe the second one will pull it all together for me. Maybe the second in the series is going to be the turning point where everything becomes amazing, or maybe the second one just carries on like this and I go, well, I like it, but I also don't like it, and I also have problems with it, and I also love bits of it. I don't know. It's an interesting one to discuss though. I had a lot of fun talking with Paul about this. We definitely got some really interesting discussion going, and I think I will probably carry on with the series at this point. I think the second one comes out later this year, so I'm intrigued enough to carry on. Let's put it that way, especially since it does end on a kind of cliffhanger, and I think there's a lot more that could be done and a lot more that could be explained. So that's my review of that one. Moving on to The Bear and the Nightingale. This is a Russian-inspired retelling of a fairy tale. It's a fairy tale that is commonly told in Russia. I don't know the original name of it, but it definitely takes influence from Russian fairy tales. We follow a young girl called Vasilisa, and we follow her family. She's from a fairly decent sized family. She has a father and she has some older siblings as well, and then she later on gets a younger sibling, so there's quite a lot of them. When she is born, her mother dies, but we actually pick up the story just before she is born, so we do see her mother at the very start of the book. And we follow her mother as she is kind of telling her nurse, who looks after the kids, about this baby that she wants to have and that she believes is going to have magical powers of some kind. So that is the kind of opening scenes, and what happens is she quickly does get pregnant and have this baby, and she dies, and this baby is Vasilisa. And we follow Vasilisa and her family as they kind of deal with the grief of her mother passing, and also then up through many, many years whilst she grows up. This book is quite short, but actually we go through a fairly large time period in these children's lives. We follow not only Vasilisa, we also follow her father and her elder brother and her elder sister a fair amount, but she is definitely the main character because she is the character who has a magical ability to be able to see and interact with the house spirits, which are essentially kind of creatures who live in the forests, creatures who live in the stables, creatures who do household tasks and help out but are never really seen by anyone. What used to happen in this world is that everyone used to believe in these kind of spirits, and they used to leave out offerings for them to help them stay strong and help them to help the humans. But as time goes on and as Christianity and various other religions start taking over, we see priests and people come to their village and start to convince people that actually they don't need to leave offerings, it was all fake, and they just need to worship God. And unfortunately, she's the only one who can actually see these spirits, and she sees the decline in them, and she starts to try her best to give everything she has to keep these spirits alive, because if she doesn't, terrible things will happen. That's a brief synopsis, but genuinely this story was a really, really lovely one, and also quite dark in places. I really enjoyed the kind of different areas it went to. This is compared to Uprooted by Naomi Novik, and to be honest, I didn't like Uprooted that much, but I really enjoyed Naomi Novik's Temeraire series, and I would say that in terms of writing style, this does have a small element of Uprooted just because it's kind of fairy tale retelling, but I would say this is quite different, and I would say it's about this young girl who is really fighting to preserve what used to be, to preserve these amazing spirits who have their own agendas but actually really help out the humans. She's fighting against this new influx of religion and fighting against these people who are coming to her village to mess things up, and I think she does a really fantastic job of, by the end of this book, making me really fall in love with the character, which I don't see that often. So I definitely think that fairy tale retellings are a bit hit and miss with me, but this one was definitely a hit. I really enjoyed it. I found that the second half was probably more interesting to me, although I think there are some really interesting things being set up in the first half. I think the second half is where it all starts to pay off. And I do think that as a standalone book, this worked really, really well, and I wouldn't feel like it needed another book, which is great. So I really did enjoy this, and I would certainly recommend it, especially if you are kind of not really that into fairy tale retellings, but you want something in the same vein as that. This is definitely a Christmassy kind of read. It focuses a lot on winter time and on evil spirits who can manipulate the cold and weather and things like that. So if you want to read this, I'd say definitely get it soon and read it in the winter time, because I think it's very apt for this time of year. And I really did enjoy it. So I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars and I would recommend it. I would recommend them both, but I think you just need to be knowing what you're going into with this one particularly, because it's a harder read by far. But I really enjoyed both, and I think both of them have real merit to them. I'd love to hear which one appeals to you more, which one you might end up picking up, and if you have read them, what did you think of them? Tell me down below in the comments. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in my next video very soon. Bye!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.